Eliza rummaged through the dusty boxes in the attic, sifting through years of accumulated clutter. Her husband, Mark, had promised to sort these things long ago, but here she was, knee-deep in his old things, trying to make room for new storage. She shifted a pile of papers when something caught her eye. An old, tattered leather-bound journal and a few photographs, tucked neatly between its pages. The photographs were faded, but the faces in them struck her like a physical blow. Mark's familiar face smiled back at her, his arm wrapped around a woman she didn't know, her head leaning against his shoulder in a way that suggested intimacy. But what truly shocked her were the twin boys in the photo. They had the same piercing blue eyes as Mark, the same broad shoulders, even the same distinctive cleft in their chins that their daughter Ava had inherited. As she stared, Eliza's hands trembled. There was no mistaking it. Those boys looked so much like her husband that she could only conclude the worst. Mark had a family he hadn't told her about, children he had somehow kept hidden. The thought sank like a stone in her stomach. That night, she waited until Ava was asleep before confronting him. She laid the photographs on the dining room table, her arms crossed as she watched Mark's face, waiting for his reaction. He looked up, confused, then took the pictures in his hand. His face fell as he registered what she had discovered. "Eliza, I can explain," he began, but his voice faltered under the weight of her piercing gaze. Her voice was barely a whisper, her hands clenched into fists as she held back tears. "Explain then. Who are these boys, Mark? And who's the woman with you?" Mark took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before he began. "Her name is Jenna. She and her husband, Adam, were good friends of mine. We were close, practically family. They wanted children but couldn't have any on their own. Jenna asked if I would be a donor, and after a lot of consideration, I agreed. I wasn't supposed to play a role in their lives. Adam was their father in every way." Eliza's mind reeled. "And you thought you didn't need to tell me this?" "I thought it was in the past," he replied, his tone pleading. "I never wanted to complicate things. Jenna and Adam made it clear that I wouldn't be involved beyond that initial act. They raised the boys, Ethan and Luke, as their own." She shook her head, unable to fully comprehend the situation. Here was a truth that fundamentally altered her view of the man she thought she knew. It wasn't just that Mark had fathered children. It was that he had hidden them from her, kept an entire part of his life locked away. In the days following Mark's confession, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She understood logically that his role had been intended as a simple act of friendship, but the deception gnawed at her. Her marriage felt like it had a new, invisible weight pressing down on it, and she wasn't sure she could carry it alone. Things took a turn when she received an invitation from Jenna. It was an offer to meet the boys, under the pretense of maintaining the long-standing friendship between the two families. Despite her misgivings, Eliza agreed to meet them. Perhaps seeing these boys would help her understand Mark's actions, even if it hurt. The day they went to Jenna and Adam's house, Eliza felt a nervous energy buzzing in her veins. As they walked up the steps, she held Mark's hand tightly, trying to keep her emotions in check. Jenna greeted them warmly at the door, a tall woman with a kind face who held herself with grace. But when Eliza looked past her, her breath caught as she saw the boys. Ethan and Luke were spitting images of Mark, from their eyes to the small details of their smiles and gestures. They were polite, friendly, clearly comfortable in their own lives. But Eliza couldn't shake the strange feeling that she was looking at pieces of her own husband, fragmented and placed in another family. Ava, her 17-year-old daughter, took an instant liking to Ethan and Luke. She saw them as new friends, fresh faces in a world she often found dull. As they talked and laughed together, Eliza felt a knot form in her stomach. She could see the easy chemistry between them, an attraction forming that felt natural and innocent, but also dangerous given what she knew. The friendship between Ava and the twins deepened quickly. Ethan and Luke were charismatic and intelligent, and they made her feel seen in a way that was both thrilling and unexpected. She found herself looking forward to their visits, spending hours talking with them about her interests, dreams, and even her fears. Eliza watched with growing unease. She saw the way Ethan's gaze lingered on Ava, the way Luke found reasons to sit close to her, leaning in when she spoke. The teenagers were oblivious to the blood connection between them, and Eliza felt trapped. She couldn't tell Ava the truth without unraveling the life they'd built, but remaining silent felt equally reckless. One evening, as the two families gathered for dinner, Eliza's worst fears seemed to materialize. Ava and Ethan sat side by side, their heads tilted toward each other as they spoke in hushed tones, laughing and trading looks that spoke of budding affection. Eliza's hands shook as she watched them, her mind racing with the implications. After dinner, she pulled Mark aside, her voice low and urgent. "We need to tell Ava the truth, Mark. She deserves to know who Ethan and Luke really are." Mark looked pained, but he shook his head. "Eliza, they're teenagers. They're just being friendly. Besides, we promised Jenna and Adam that we'd respect the arrangement. It's not our place to disrupt their lives." "Not our place?" Eliza echoed, her voice rising. "You may not think it's serious, but I see it, Mark. They're drawn to her, and she's drawn to them. We can't risk this getting any more complicated." The tension between them grew, an unspoken divide forming as Eliza grappled with the pressure of protecting her daughter. Eliza couldn't hold back any longer. The uncertainty, the fear, it was too much. She found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts consumed by images of her daughter and the twins, oblivious to the truth of their connection. One evening, as Ava was getting ready for a party, Eliza sat her down. Her voice wavered as she spoke, explaining everything she had discovered, from Mark's involvement as a donor to the unspoken connection between Ava and the boys. Ava's face went pale, her expression turning from confusion to shock, and finally to anger. "How could you keep this from me?" she demanded, her eyes filling with tears. "I've been spending all this time with them, feeling this connection. And you knew." Eliza reached out, but Ava pulled away, her hurt palpable. "I'm sorry, Ava. We thought it was best to keep things simple, to spare you from a truth that could change everything. But I see now that was a mistake. You deserve to know." Ava struggled to process the revelation, grappling with the feelings she'd developed for Ethan, the growing friendship with Luke. It was as though her world had been upended, and everything she thought she knew was no longer certain. She spent the following days in silence, unable to look her parents in the eyes, feeling a betrayal that ran deeper than anything she'd experienced before. The family tried to go on with life, but the atmosphere was irrevocably changed. Ava kept her distance from Ethan and Luke, and the twins sensed her coldness, confused and hurt by her sudden withdrawal. Eliza watched, guilt gnawing at her as she saw the pain etched in her daughter's face, knowing that her silence had contributed to Ava's suffering. Over time, the family slowly began to repair the broken pieces of their relationships. Ava found a way to redefine her bond with Ethan and Luke, recognizing them as family rather than friends. It was a painful process, but gradually she grew closer to them in a way that felt more appropriate. Eliza and Mark also worked to rebuild their marriage, finding solace in open conversations and a commitment to honesty that hadn't been there before. They acknowledged the complexity of their family, but they were determined to forge a path forward, bound by trust rather than secrets. Together, they created a new understanding of family, one that acknowledged the past but wasn't weighed down by it.